Next on Currents News, the MTA is taking precautions against the coronavirus, but so are Catholic academies in Brooklyn and Queens. There's a policy in place to protect students, teachers, and parents. I'm Tim Harfman. That story's coming up.
Also on Currents News, Governor Cuomo announces a second coronavirus case in New York, this one forcing some school closures. And prayers for the people of Tennessee devastated by deadly tornadoes, the latest from Nashville. Plus, a gift from Catholic Charities is making a big difference in the lives of students who are homeless. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. New York is confirming a second coronavirus infection. A Westchester lawyer who works in Manhattan. We'll hear from Governor Cuomo on that in a moment. But first, we begin with the action plan by Catholic schools in the Brooklyn Diocese to ensure students and faculty are safe. Currents News' Tim Harfman has the latest from Bay Ridge.
Catholic schools in Brooklyn and Queens are on alert, taking action to make sure everyone, teachers and kids alike, are better protected against coronavirus.
Parents were expressing concern of teachers, staff, and students returning from traveling abroad.
The superintendent of schools for the Brooklyn Diocese, Dr. Tom Chadzuko, is now requiring everyone coming back to school from abroad to go to the doctor first. Students and staff will need medical clearance before being allowed back into class. Other precautions are happening full time.
The schools are cleaned every evening. All schools are cleaned and sanitized. The children are always reminded to cough in your elbow, use tissues and wash your hands as frequently as possible.
The diocesan Catholic school system is not alone in taking on the virus outbreak. The MTA is also taking precautions against the coronavirus, disinfecting buses and trains to make sure commuters are safe. Subway workers are wiping down turnstiles, MetroCard machines, and handrails daily. The entire fleet of subway cars and all the city buses disinfected every 3 days. Strap hangers hoping the next train is the only thing they'll catch.
It's definitely good to be cautious. I saw them, they look at those covered like a white substance around the.
You think it will help?
I hope it does. All I can say is I hope for humanity's sake.
In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
More now on the latest virus infection in New York. A New Rochelle resident in his 50s is in the hospital. His case is on the heels of yesterday's involving a woman in Manhattan. This morning in Albany, Governor Cuomo said the man also had underlying respiratory illness.
He is ill and he is hospitalized. That's juxtaposed with the case we talked about yesterday, which was a 39-year-old healthcare worker who is positive, but she's at home. She's not even hospitalized. And they said, why isn't she hospitalized? Because she has mild symptoms.
Neither patient has been identified. The Bronx Jewish Academy that the man's son attends is closed for now, along with 2 other Jewish schools in Westchester. In an emergency move, the Fed is cutting interest rates by 0.5 point as fears about the economic fallout from the coronavirus mount. It's the biggest single cut since the 2008 financial crisis, and rare since it's happening outside a regular meeting. The Fed is also signaling it's ready to do more if needed. Wall Street showed it, too, is worried about the economic impact of the coronavirus. The 3 major indexes ended the day in the red. The Dow ended down almost 800 points to close at 25,917. The NASDAQ was off nearly 270 points, finishing at 8684, and the S&P dropped 87 points to end the day at 3,003. We're getting word tonight that Pope Francis has tested negative for coronavirus. The Holy Father has been suffering from a cold. The report that he doesn't have the virus is in a leading Italian newspaper. Melissa Butts has the story from the Vatican.
83-year-old Pope Francis, who has been suffering from a cold for nearly a week now, has tested negative for the coronavirus. The Vatican did not comment on the diagnosis, but last week said the Pope was feeling slightly unwell. Even with his cold, Pope Francis prayed the Angelus on Sunday and greeted people during the few meetings he had last week, including at the general audience. However, for the first time, the Pope did not attend his spiritual exercises out of Rome. They were scheduled this week from Sunday to Friday. Instead, he's participating from his home at Casa Santa Marta, inside the Vatican. By resting in this way, he's hoping to make a full recovery and pick up his normal schedule next week. In Italy, out of more than 2,000 infected, 52 have died from the disease, while 149 have been cured. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
The Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes is closing its healing pools because of the coronavirus outbreak in Italy. Officials at the shrine are concerned about the safety and health of pilgrims visiting one of the most revered places in the world. The pools where the sick bathe in hopes of healing are closed until further notice. Tonight here at home, Tennessee is reeling after a powerful storm system cut across the heart of the state. Tornadoes killed at least 22 people and created a trail of devastation that struck Nashville, causing many buildings to collapse. Daryl Forges reports from the city.
The sun rising over Tennessee reveals the true extent of the damage.
A lot of homes that were there in these subdivisions that are totally wiped away. I mean, there's nothing left. You can't even tell a home was there before.
A deadly tornado ripped through Nashville overnight.
There it is. Go inside now.
Leaving people here just moments to respond.
It sounded like gunshots going off. We heard the windows blowing in.
So we're running down the hallway, the ceiling is just caving in, just debris everywhere.
As the hours passed, more and more deaths confirmed. Now search and rescue teams are working to locate anyone who might still be trapped.
We're just trying to map it out so that we can actually put more boots on the grounds to make sure that we're taking care of people that we may not even know that's injured or hurt.
Schools in the area are closed for the week, some because of damage, some because they're still being used as shelters. Polling locations in several counties have delayed Super Tuesday voting by 1 hour due to street closures and power outages.
We also want folks to exercise their rights and get out there and vote.
In Nashville, Tennessee, I'm Daryl Forges reporting.
The Diocese of Nashville is offering prayers in the wake of the storm's terrible destruction. A statement released this morning says, "Our prayers first turn to the repose of the souls of those who have died. May they find peace in God's boundless mercy. May their families and friends find consolation in his endless love." The church is also mobilizing Catholic charities to help out those who are suffering from the tornadoes. President Trump is going to Tennessee on Friday. He spoke about the disaster this morning.
We send our love and our prayers of the nation to every family that was affected, and we will get there and we will recover and we will rebuild and we will help them.
Trump said FEMA is already on the ground in Tennessee working closely with state leaders. The polls are closing on what could be a decisive day for the Democrats running for president. Voters in 14 states cast their ballots on this Super Tuesday.
Hi, how are you?
Senator Bernie Sanders greeted by supporters as he arrived to vote this morning in Burlington, Vermont, while over in Massachusetts.
2020 is a moment we've been called to.
Senator Elizabeth Warren spoke to the crowd outside of her polling place in Cambridge. She's vowing to stay in the race until the convention this summer.
This is about both beating Donald Trump and about delivering real change in January 2021.
Super Tuesday saw voters in 14 states and American Samoa hit the polls. It's the most important day of the 2020 presidential campaign so far, where about a third of the delegates are up for grabs. Joe Biden feeling confident after a big weekend win in South Carolina and the endorsements of 3 former rivals.
Get up! Let's take back this country. We're the United States of America. And there's not a single thing we cannot do if we do it together.
Sanders called out the so-called political establishment endorsing Biden.
From day one, we have been taking on the establishment. And let me be very clear, it is no surprise. They do not want me to become president.
For the first time, former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg will be on the ballot. He has spent millions trying to emerge as a top contender in Super Tuesday states.
I can beat Donald Trump. And I don't know that any of the other Democratic candidates can. I'm ready for the job, and I don't think any of the others are.
President Trump has collected 86 bound delegates so far. His lone competitor, former Governor Bill Weld, has collected just 1. St. John's University political analyst Brian Brown will be here tomorrow to talk about the results and what it means for Catholic voters. In Israel, supporters cheered after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared victory in today's general election. Exit polls gave him a narrow lead over Benny Gantz, who's refusing to concede defeat. The polls also show neither candidate's party will have a straightforward path to forming a new government. This was the third election in less than a year for Israel. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is currently facing corruption charges. Catholics around the U.S. are making their voices heard, telling aid to the church in need in a new study, their beliefs on Christian persecution. Here to tell us more about the results is the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. Christopher, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be back with you, Christine.
And there are a lot of interesting facts and figures in this report, especially when aid to the church in need compared Christian persecution to other global issues. Let's take a look at this. They said 52% of Catholics are very concerned about Christian persecution, but that ranked lower than human trafficking, where 79% are concerned, poverty, with 70% of Catholics concerned, climate change, 57%, and the refugee crisis at 55%. So, Chris, what did aid to the church in need have to say about these numbers?
Well, look, on one hand, they're quite pleased that a majority, over 50% of American Catholics, consider this a top issue. On the other hand, they're saying, look, there are lots of issues, and this is kind of getting buried underneath some other issues. And as Christians, we should be concerned about this. So one of the things that they're doing is trying to say, look, we have to do a better job of educating fellow believers as to what's happening in our own backyards. Christian persecution is a banner issue for them, and so they'd like to see this issue at the top of the list.
Sure. There's another set of numbers I want to take a look at where U.S. Catholics believe the persecution of Christians is the most severe. At the top, Iran with 36%, right under that, North Korea at 34%, then Iraq at 33%, Syria at 32%. Are Catholics right about those numbers?
Well, they're not wrong in the fact that all those countries that you just ticked off are bad actors.
Right.
Actually, North Korea is the worst offender, but actually other countries such as Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Pakistan, they rank in the top 5. Countries such as Iran actually rank closer to 10. Again, these are all terrible offenders in places where Christians on the ground have a very tough situation when it comes to practicing their faith.
Right.
But it just depends on what sort of statistics you're looking at.
All right. Most Catholic Americans in the study believe that the U.S. should help persecuted Christians. How do we help?
Well, folks have a range of responses. The most preferred tends to be diplomatic pressure. Others favor granting sort of asylum to those in need. That's, of course, government-led responses. But then there's the personal response, and a lot of the Catholic surveys said, well, Catholics certainly should be praying for those and remember them in their own parish. And they should be donating to organizations such as Aid to the Church in Need that help them. While they expressed the desire that they should be doing this, the survey also found that most Catholics aren't actually doing it in practice.
All right. Christopher White, the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
All right, there is more news headed your way. The Supreme Court is about to hear the first big abortion case of the Trump presidency. Could it eventually reverse Roe v. Wade? We'll break it down with a pro-life advocate.
This laundry room is going to make a world of difference for so many families. I'm Emily Drewby. That's ahead.
And sisters separated for more than half a century finally meet one another. Their heartwarming story and so much more ahead on Currents News. But first, if you have a story idea or want to share a tip, email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. It's the gift that will keep giving, and it's already making a big difference in the lives of kids in need. Catholic Charities has gifted a washer and dryer that's now available for students at a public elementary school in Upper Manhattan. And it's filling a gaping need, clean clothes for boys and girls who are homeless. Currents News' Emily Drewby reports from Washington Heights.
It's a miracle for so many at PS 132, a miracle that came from Catholic Charities.
Many of us take for granted that we can wash our clothes, but it was not something that could happen for many of the families here.
At the Washington Heights grade school, almost a quarter of the students are homeless or housing insecure, a rampant issue in New York City public schools where 1 in every 10 students is homeless. Sometimes laundry is not in the budget, which can be really embarrassing for young students.
They don't want to come to school because they feel like, oh my God, they're clean, we're not that clean, we're kind of dirty.
At PS 132, it was affecting attendance.
When I would ask students, like, why weren't you at school yesterday? We missed you. My uniform was dirty.
Staff members helped out by washing clothes at their homes, but Principal Wendy Poveda knew they needed a more permanent fix. That's when she reached out to Catholic Charities of New York's Alianza Youth Services.
When she described that she was taking the clothes herself to her house, we were like, oh, no, no, no. We could buy it.
And they did.
2, 3.
The room comes fully stocked with laundry baskets, detergent, and even dryer sheets.
It was so cool when I saw it.
A very cool sight, according to Soraya's daughter, Jasmine. The family does plan on using the machines.
It feels great because we get to know that the school is giving us a free chance to use the washer and dryer.
Principal Poveda might even use the laundry herself to eliminate any negative stigma attached to it. The school is accepting detergent, dryer sheets, and more. Catholic Charities is in talks with a few other yet-to-be-named schools to create similar programs, providing hope and creating help, one cycle at a time. In Washington Heights, New York, Emily Drewby, Current News.
We must decide as a country to be morally and logically consistent with ourselves, and that if any infant born alive is a full person under federal law, then they are worthy of humane care and protection under federal law.
That's Patrina Mosley testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee in the name of babies born alive after an abortion. The director of Life, Culture, and Women's Advocacy at the Family Research Council has dedicated her work to the sanctity of life. She joins us now from D.C. to talk about the latest efforts. Welcome.
Thank you.
Patrina, I want to start with the latest. Louisiana, which was actually recently ranked as the most pro-life state in America, is having a case heard at the Supreme Court tomorrow. It could eliminate abortion access across the state. How do you feel about this case's outcome?
Well, this case is dealing with a Louisiana law that's really about health care, the women's health care. Right now, the abortion industry is making about abortion access and thinking that this is going to be restrictions, but having admitting privileges to hospitals is really in favor of caring for women, not about abortion.
All right, this is a historic decision. It's the first big abortion case of the Trump era, and since Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch were appointed to the high court. Could this help eventually undo Roe v. Wade?
Well, at the present time, we do think that it's important to put women's health care first in this issue. And right now, we've seen the abortion industry fail women, particularly in Louisiana, where you have abortion clinics who have repeatedly and consistently failed state inspection reports, hired people to do abortions who weren't certified to do so. You had women that have died. So right now, we're getting in front of just caring for women, and we'll see what happens with the courts to come this week.
All right, as I mentioned before, you testified in the abortion cases that appeared before the Senate. Both bills failed by less than 10 votes. What was your reaction?
I was very sad about that. This should have been a bipartisan effort when it comes to the humane treatment of a child that can feel pain and also the humane treatment of a child that is born. This is a situation where we're talking about just giving medical care to infants who survived abortions. They're laying there on the table, clicking for their lives, and we're discussing whether or not medical care should be given. This should have been a no-brainer and a bipartisan effort, but unfortunately it wasn't. But it shows you the extremity of the Democrats right now. They are out of touch with Americans. Mostly Americans agree with giving care to infants, particularly those who are pro-choice, and the Democratic Party is out of touch with their conscience and humane care. So right now, this just makes them look really bad.
You say your goal is to motivate others to action from a biblical worldview. What made you so passionate about protecting the unborn?
I think this is one of the things in scriptures that are so clear. They're protecting the lives of the innocent and giving justice to those who can't speak for themselves is one of the clearest principles we see in the Bible. And to be silent is just unacceptable. This is a time where we have an opportunity to speak out, particularly here in America, and we should use that freedom to do what is right and what is just.
All right, Patrina Mosley, the Director of Life, Culture, and Women's Advocacy at the Family Research Council. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Pro-lifers are unhappy with Colombia's Supreme Court over the rights of the unborn. They had been demanding abortion be illegal in the Latin American country from the moment of conception. The court decided to hear the case, but couldn't come to a resolution either way. So the law stays unchanged, meaning abortions are allowed in specific cases, including rape and when the mother's health is at risk. The judges are leaving it all up to the Colombian Congress. The Pope is sending to Mexico his two top experts in the fight to protect young and vulnerable people from abuse. Archbishop Charles Scicluna and Monsignor Jordi Bermeo are heading up the mission later this month. They're going to help the Mexican bishops develop ways to tackle abuse and develop further child protections. This is the same team that the Holy Father sent to Chile 2 years ago when allegations of abuse and mishandling of cases caused an uproar. Mexico has the world's second largest Catholic population after Brazil. Even though the Holy Father is under the weather, he's still leading the church. And today, a new video featuring the Pope is being released by the Vatican. In it, Francis invites the world to celebrate Laudato Si Week.
¿Qué tipo de mundo queremos dejar a quienes nos sucedan, a los niños que están creciendo? Motivado por esta pregunta, quisiera invitarlos a participar en la Semana Laudato Si, del 16 al 24 de mayo del 2020. Es una campaña global en ocasión del 5º aniversario de la Carta Encíclica Laudato Si sobre el cuidado de la casa común. Renuevo mi llamado urgente a responder a la crisis ecológica. El clamor de la tierra y el clamor de los pobres no dan para más.
The week is designed to encourage Catholic communities to take bolder actions for the protection of creation. Up next on Currents News, a helping hand for higher education. We'll tell you which university is now waiving tuition for students from low and middle class backgrounds. And the story behind these sisters who have been looking for one another for almost 60 years. We're coming right back. Pope Francis is naming a new auxiliary bishop for the Diocese of Rockville Center on Long Island. He's Father Luis Miguel Romero, the 65-year-old bishop-elect. Currently is the pastor of Our Lady of Loretto Parish in Hempstead. He's fluent in Spanish and English. The bishop-elect's installation is set for next month. The University of Houston is trying to keep college accessible. Starting this fall, the institution will cover the full tuition of first-time freshmen with family incomes of $65,000 or less. Families who make more than that but less than $125,000 will be eligible for tuition support between $500 and $2,000 per year. The price for the education can cost between $5,000 and $7,000 per term. And finally tonight, two long-lost sisters reunited in North Carolina and at exactly the right time.
It's taken you forever.
Gail and Carolyn have been searching for each other for 60 years. Their mother had given Gail up for adoption, and Catholic Charities had sealed her records. Then Carolyn turned to Ancestry.com and 23andMe, finally finding her long-lost sister just 2 weeks after losing their other sister, Donna.
There's such a big hole in my heart, and you stepped in and took some of that away.
I think God wanted us to meet each other.
The two plan to spend the rest of the week catching up on a lifetime of memories. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.